In a world that is rapidly changing across multiple dimensions, we have come to witness a new era where our entire species lingers precariously close to self-destruction. And yet we have a future of immense potential, just waiting to be tapped. It is as if the whole of humanity is sleepwalking along the jagged edges of a cliff, where one misstep will send us spiraling down into an eternal abyss. And we desperately need to wake up and take charge of our collective destiny. Which way will this balance ultimately tip? Will we find it in ourselves to back away from the edge of disaster? These questions are of urgent public concern. To better itself, humanity needs to mix together a recipe of understanding, empathy, and logical problem solving that will produce genuine social change. But so much holds us back. America is teeming with a virulent infestation of hate, bigotry, distrust, and an indifference to the plight of our fellow citizens. We are a nation bitterly divided across a multitude of splintering fractures, as political polarization has sent waves of discontent to corrugate across the landscape of our republic. As we isolate ourselves into clusters that share the same ideologies, we lose faith in our fellow citizens, our governments, and even ourselves. The trust in each other that previous generations took for granted are now in serious doubt as rapid change transforms every facet of our society and our human lives. It is no wonder that a sociocultural revolution is boiling beneath the surface of contemporary relations everywhere. With striking regularity, the currents of this revolution erupt across the fray of our daily lives in many guises. It is evident in the political discourse that pervades every topic and social issue, making it difficult to engage with each other without fear that even the most benign interaction will end in fierce debate. No matter a person's particular position on the many issues of today's world, a common thread in the confusion of disagreements, conflicts, and challenges is the explicit recognition that something is fundamentally wrong with society as we have come to know it. I like to say that Americans as a whole share a very similar vision of what we'd like our nation to be, but we have very different ideas about how to get there. A juncture has been reached upon which the conventional mechanisms for managing conflict in human affairs are becoming much less effective, with no clear alternatives to guide us through these transitional and, let's be honest, uncertain times. Despite our insecurities and inability to establish a clear direction, our world does continue to change around us, at a rate that elates some, but is unsettling for others. Rapid change through both peaceful and violent means is a has come to expect. Throughout the globe, these changes have manifested themselves in social movements for social rights on behalf of formerly excluded ethnic minorities, gays and lesbians, those suffering from disabilities, the elderly, and religious groups. These changes have helped to reshape our attitudes about gender and sexuality, global conflicts, the state of our environment, and the need to alter our approach to human relations from the interpersonal to international levels. And while these changes have come at the benefit to some, others feel left behind and contemptuous toward the newly emergent global order. As the esteemed sociologist Robert Schaefer notes in a recent survey of the phenomenon of globalization, quote, "We live in a time of global change, but people experience change in different ways. Global change affects some people more than others, and it can have different consequences, good and bad, for people in different settings," end quote. These divergent experiences can, and often do, lead to social upheavals, where one group seeks to contest the changing guard and preserve the dwindling status quo. These sentiments were expressed with renewed and, quite frankly, even greater urgency by another sociologist, Anthony Giddens. Our age, he noted, is distinguished by its, quote, "sheer pace of change." Traditional civilizations may have been considerably more dynamic than other pre-modern systems, but the rapidity of change in conditions of modernity is extreme, end quote. Friends, in our angst and desperate quest to understand the root causes of today's social instability, we must look to the transforming events of the past and work to discover the common patterns in history that might help explain the scope and rapidity of global change. One thing upon which there is little dispute is that the evolutionary trajectory of our nation has come to a precipice, whereupon the rule of law has been replaced by idiosyncratic bureaucracies that have been designed to criminalize failure and poverty and immunize strengths of wealth as the only measurement of success. We are governed by the most elite and wealthy members of the ruling class, and this has resulted in a massive sociocultural lag, which has been occurring for about a century or so. And we're in modern understandings that could and can dramatically improve human life go utterly unincorporated and ignored, if not outright suppressed by the ruling class in their desire to maintain a position of dominant power. It is only when we draw back the curtain on the corridors of power and the elite chambers of the ruling class that we can fully expose the mechanisms upon which social progress and purposeful change are impeded at every step. These developments are, of course, not unique to America. Global surveys reveal that the large majority of citizens around the world distrust and even despise their political representatives and lack faith in their governing institutions. It is in this context that we must come to understand the crisis of democracy and the challenges being waged against the legitimacy of governmental institutions. Furthermore, any concrete understanding of how power really works within our society, it requires a comprehension of the structure and dynamics of the mass media, which embodies a structure characterized by its organization around a core of global multimedia business networks. These networks proliferate political messages in a context designed to induce the personalization of politics, making the media, of course, a most potent political weapon. Campaigns are no longer centered on the issues and policies, but on the personal character of the politicians, and the consequence of which has resulted in the rise of scandal politics as a key strategy for power making within our society. Mounting evidence shows that what suffers most under this era of media politics is the credibility of political parties, politicians, and you guessed it, governments as a whole. Now, with so much power standing against us and so much rhetoric clouding the issues, how can we possibly cultivate a culture of real change? A social movement is about purposeful collective actions that aim to transform the values and institutions of society. It is not the flash of brilliance or mind of a genius that really changes the world. Change is a product of the loud, angry, and determined voice of those who refuse to take no for an answer, those who reject the mediocrity of the social norms, those whose hearts are pure, and those who profess an uncompromising vision that cannot be denied. It has often been said that one person can change the world, but this is really not that accurate. It takes a collective movement of diverse stakeholders to initiate change. Systemic issues like poverty and inequality are the real causes of violence, drug and alcohol addiction, crime, racism and bigotry, and really every other societal ill that plagues our nation. Inequality is, quite simply, the breeding ground for hate and fear-induced polarization. Furthermore, it robs us of our capacity for empathy and solidarity. So how do we achieve the equality we need to progress as a society? Sadly, I don't know the answer to this question, but I only know that it won't be easy. I want to share a story of hope that illustrates what courageous people can do on a small level to turn the tide of inequality just a little bit at a time. Lusada is a Puerto Rican section of New York's Lower East Side that has set an extraordinary example for what can be achieved when community members come together. It is a story of a disenfranchised community plagued by stark poverty and political abandonment. What was once a decaying community of empty lots, vacant and bruised buildings, and a virulent breeding ground for rats and cockroaches was transformed into a thriving hub of community-driven self-reliance. Whereas New York City, which owned many of the vacant lots and buildings, had done nothing to improve them, well, local citizens came together and revitalized their community on their own. Through their own initiative, they transformed the rubble-strewn empty lots into community gardens, vest pocket parks, and playgrounds. Nearly everything that was used came directly from the debris that once filled the lots, such as recycling old tires to make swings. One of the lots was converted into an outdoor cultural center, where poets, local theater groups, and musicians regularly performed. Some lots were adopted by schools and turned into teaching centers where local youth could study agriculture and other trades. It was a transformative action that turned a ghetto into a community and did so with profound positive results. Local citizens occupied abandoned buildings, repairing them through their own labor to create housing and other community resources. Several youth gangs joined in on the efforts, and through their constructive efforts, many were able to get off the street and become productive members of the community. The neighborhood gardens grew fresh and organic produce, contributing to the improved health of the people, lowering food costs, and even providing a source of revenue. This was community revitalization at its finest. I should point out, however, that most of this effort was performed without the permission of the city, and in many instances was done despite opposition from city officials. The community members didn't seek allowance or wait until the city acted, but instead they acted in their own interest, and they took back their community. But even with heavy opposition and many legal challenges, land leases and ownership were eventually won under the squatter rights laws, and the citizens of Lusada were able to change the course of their inequality successfully and officially. Obviously, this type of effort is not possible in every community, but it does serve as an example of what can be accomplished when people come together. It is also a testament to the power of taking charge and challenging the legitimacy of local government's authority when it fails to adequately serve the needs of that community. We, the people, must extrude ourselves from the culture of conformity and timidness that has us sleepwalking along the jagged edges of a self-destructive cliff. We can no longer afford to depend upon our corrupted political system and compromised politicians to effectuate our rescue. Furthermore, we cannot continue to pin all our hopes on the electoral process, hoping that change is just one election away. Instead, we must embrace a new culture of cooperation and communal solidarity to address the problems of our society in the spaces where we live. We must summon the courage and imagination of Lusada and take back our communities. It is a bold and radical plan, to be sure, but it begins with a renewed commitment to empathy. Instead of allowing our differences to divide us, we must find common ground and unite with those with whom we disagree to advance changes in areas where there is agreement. In saying this, I'm not meaning to imply that it is the sole responsibility of communities and individuals to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make their own worlds better if they ever expect to see change. Of course, the end goal is a country of empathy and understanding, where humanity cares for one another on a nationwide and worldwide level, as well as banding together locally. But we need to start somewhere and take the first steps towards a greater future for everyone. Edina Brown is here with us today to talk about her book, Make Humanity Great, and to share her insights on how we can establish a foundation for change. And that, my dear friends, is the final word up front. I'm Sean Sainhart, and this is Coup Save America. I want to thank ASUS for providing the wardrobe for this show and ask that you check out their line of affordable and stylish clothing for men and women by visiting their website at asus.com, ASOS.com. And with that, we will be right back, and I will see you on the other side.
Save America. Coup Save America. Podcast you need every week. What you will do for latest news and understand economy and politics. This is Coup Save America.
And welcome back. Friends, it seems as though we might be having some technical issues, so I'm going to, we'll be right back. Okay, friends. Okay. So let me go ahead and bring in my special guest. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
There's a little bit of a delay hearing you, so bear with me for just a minute.
Sure. There you go.
Okay. What? Hold on just 1 second.
Sure.
We're going to go to a technical card. We'll be right back. There we go. Okay. Still not hearing anything. Bear with us for just one moment, folks. Hold on, please. What is going on? Mac, can you give me a sound check? There seems to be a delay. There seems to be a delay. There seems to be a delay. Okay, let's try this again. Edina, hold on, folks, sorry.
Hello, producer here. I'm going to bring Edina in just to say hi while Sean gets his earpiece worked out. He just can't hear anything that anyone's saying. Hi, Edina.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Okay, good.
You seem to have working equipment.
Well, today. Today.
I don't know. Everything works before we start. We do test this stuff, but then
Yeah. I mean, it happens. It's okay. So, shall I talk or? All right.
I am so sorry.
No problem.
Thank
I was
you,
just wondering if I
everybody.
should lead the show. I was like, okay, I'll do it. Why not?
Hey, you'd be better.
No, I don't know. From what I heard you saying, I think we all need to hear what you have to say too. But thank you for having me.
um, I have a bit of an eye infection, so I
Oh,
haven't been able to get through your book.
okay, no, it's okay.
I'm loving the book.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is very inspiring.
Hmm,
And
appreciate
one of the
that.
things that most of what I've gotten to so far has
Mhm.
talked a lot about, and this is a very important issue, the racial inequality.
Mm,
And I found it so fascinating, the story that you shared about being at the fast food restaurant
mm, yeah,
during the time of Donald Trump, of course.
yeah.
And could you share that story and just, I mean, I can't imagine. I can understand the conflict that you had because there's this whole people that are comfortable with you as a person, but yet at the same time so insensitive. And the way you handle it, I think, is really a lesson for all of us. So if you'd share that story, that would be wonderful.
So that's interesting because I'm trying to think of which story. I go to get fast food so many times in this book, probably. But you know, so what I can think of in particular, and I'm not really sure if this is the story you're mentioning. I first thought of what you were talking about in terms of homelessness, and us going to fast food restaurants and making sure that we give money to people, and instead of just handing them money, we actually go and purchase things for them. So that's one story I could think of in the book pertaining to that, in particular in fast food. Um, but in terms of the racism and the racial inequality that I talk about in the book, uh, it really goes along with the story of, of course, me being a Black woman and all the things I experienced. But, this is before Trump. I think Trump literally is just like, he's just another symptom of this illness that we all have. And there's been many philosophers that talk about how race is just in the air. Like we are breathing it in every single day. I am as a Black person, I have racist tendencies. We probably wouldn't call it racism, but bias that I might hold against my own culture. And so it really is everywhere. And I don't always handle it gracefully. I will be completely honest with you. It was really challenging to do so as an elected official. It got very, very, very toxic and very chaotic in that role. But I do when I can. I'd handle it with grace when I can. And that was a time in which I really had to compose myself. And even then, it was never seen as that. My white counterparts that were in politics, no matter how much they yelled or screamed, I always joke that their collar the top button would pop off. They'd be so upset. They'd be arguing and threatening to sue each other, but no one ever described them as aggressive or, hostile. But that was a label that I was often given. So, I'd say honestly, before Trump got in office and, especially after, it's just been, racism has just been here. And I don't know. I don't know how any of us people of color deal with it with a measure of grace. I did understand, and I know this is not a popular opinion, but I did understand the rioting and I understood all of that, the protest.
Yeah, one of the things that touched me in your book when you talked about how a lot of your progressive friends, would see these injustices and they'd be upset about it, and yet feel a sense of despair and hopelessness. And I can't help but feel the same way. It just seems as though no matter how much we do to protest, no matter who we elect, no matter what we try to do, it just seems that this issue, especially with police brutality, is just continuous. And I mean, there was just an incident the other day, and I think it was in Atlanta, where police were tackling a person and beating them up. Now, they did get suspended, which to me is like, wait a minute, suspended? That's assault.
Right.
And we can't even seem to hold these people accountable in the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things I also realize is that everybody can't speak up. One of the things I find so frustrating is that back in the day, and I mentioned this in the book as well, not only are my friends kind of like sitting around the coffee table talking about issues, but, maybe a little bit nervous to move forward and do something. But back in the day, people were the same way. We talk about Martin Luther King Jr. as if everyone loved him, but there were a lot of people who were against what he was doing. A lot of Black people, a lot of white people who were like, be quiet. Like, we've got it relatively good now. Like, we're not in shackles, outwardly speaking, right? But the reality of it is that people are still afraid now. People were afraid back then. They're afraid now. It just doesn't look like we have as many Martin Luther King Jr.'s anymore. It looks like we're all really comfortable. And the ones of us that want to stand up, it just seems to be so few. And in the book, I do talk about it being like a whole bunch of fires that you keep putting out, and another one comes in, and another one comes in. It just seems like you can't put them out fast enough. And that is literally the way it feels. And I really want to give people hope, because the way we can get this solved is not going to be conventional methods. It's not going to be just marching. It's not going to be protesting. It might not even be climbing the Capitol, because we saw how that one went, right? But I think what it's going to take is unconventional methods for our group of people, for progressive thinkers and liberal thinkers. It's just going to take a different methodology than we're used to. We are kind of used to fighting up when something happens, fighting and, talking to each other, supporting each other in certain ways, but then we kind of disperse, and then something happens again, we disperse. And, I can offer that, but I want to hear more of what you have to say. I can offer some tips for that.
Yeah, it's just frustrating to me that we have, like you said, there's a lot of people who just feel too comfortable with
Yes.
the way things are. And, I think that there's one of the things that we need to do is we need to start talking to each other.
Yes.
And, I just had, on Facebook, I just had some discussions with some friends who, I made the point that, and this is from Martin Luther King as well, you don't just not work with people because they're Republicans, or, hey, maybe they're even racist. It's easy to be silent and just say, well, I'm not dealing with that person, right?
Yeah.
Well, you have to find common ground where you can. I like to tell people, racism is not necessarily the problem. It's the symptom of a much deeper problem. And we're never going to solve that if we don't address the causal roots of our society's ills. And we have a lot, when it comes to the African Americans and a lot of, there's a lot of people in this country that have been left behind for far too long.
Yeah.
And it just seems as though we're not talking to each other.
Yeah, we
We're not
are.
engaging.
Yeah. Yeah. That is another point that I actually want to make. If you can imagine, am a part of a lot of different like boards and, progressive groups. And I get asked to speak to people or join. Hey, can you be a part of this? Can you be a part of that? And I often find it also, as you said, frustrating to hear people rationalize not working together because somebody is not an environmentalist, or someone is not eco-friendly, or someone is, not anti-abortion. We just keep, splitting ourselves into different directions to where there's like 5 of us that can get anything done. And one of the things I have said repeatedly over the past several years is that we need to just stop finding ways to be different and just remember what the larger goal is. And we're not doing that. I think people are talking to people that look like them, sound like them, and are repeating their rhetoric. And that goes for both sides. That goes for progressives, and that goes for people that are more conservative. We really are. And it's easy to do, by the way. The internet allows us to find people who think like us, and we can just like huddle with them. But, the unfortunate part of that, of course, is we're not getting anything done. We're just in our little silos, and we're talking to each other and complaining about this one and that one, and we're not getting anything done. And as you can see, the world is just kind of going to hell in a handbasket, as if you don't mind me saying that. So, what I would tell people to do is just coalesce with everyone that is at least like 20% like-minded. I am very much for social justice issues, but, there's a reason for that, right? I've experienced certain things, and I know other people of color who have, so I want to stand up for that. But am I against environmental issues? Absolutely not. And I would totally hold hands and break bread with people who are very, very pro-environment issues, right? And I do that. I actually am friends with a lot of activists who are fighting right now against, all these different power plants that are being built in New Jersey, because I'm in New Jersey. And some of them are not into social justice issues, but I can help them, they can help me. And that's really how it should work. And we have to do that. We just have to build on what we have, because we cannot afford any longer to keep going in different directions and not working together. So we're better together than we are apart, for sure. I'm here.
Yeah, and I love what you just said.
Oh, thank you. I was making sure you're still here.
It when you talk about the
Mhm.
environment, especially
Yes.
here again, people of color and minorities are
Mhm.
most affected
Yes.
by the environmental condition, climate change,
Yes.
and even with the new bill, the Inflation Reduction Bill, again,
Mhm.
that tends, that's going to harm again these communities that have already been harmed the most. And I don't think people understand the the structure of our society and how it is so
Mhm.
slanted against certain groups in favor of other groups.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found promising um, during the unrest over the Black Lives Matter was that there was really a multi-racial, multicultural coalition that you saw come together.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, what always tends to happen is that it sort of dissipates,
Yes.
right? Once the news headline kind of subsides, what would you say is something that we could turn that in? Because I don't always like the reactive response. I want us to be proactive, and I
Mhm.
mean, I don't want there to have to be another, you know, person that's
George
killed by
Floyd.
the
Yeah.
police in
Yeah.
order to. One of the things that you actually suggested, and I know people are going to be scared and they're going to be hesitant to do this, but you actually propose a solution for community policing in your book that involves going to the police yourself and talk a bit about that and what success you've had.
Yeah. So even as a councilwoman, I suggested this and it was frowned upon by conservative. Yeah. Yeah. So I was the only progressive voice on my town council as I, when I was a tough part. Conservatives weren't for it, and then progressives were kind of for it, but not so much. It really does not take much, right? It would require people, families, if you want to go with just your family, your husband, your wife, your kids, whatever, you go to the police station when you move to a new town, or maybe you've been there for a while and you have no idea who these people are, and you introduce yourself. I understand why people would be afraid to do that, which is why I would suggest to do it, in a larger group, right? If you just do it as your family, people might be scared, like, oh no, they know where we live. The police know where you live anyway. Like people have always said that to me. Oh, people will know where I live. This is one of the reasons why I've heard people say they don't want to attend council meetings. They don't want to speak up at Board of Ed meetings. Well, people know where you are anyway. The police know where you are. The government knows where you are. Get over it. Like that's that. Right. Sorry, I don't hope no one's offended by that. But the reality is when you go and you speak to them and you show that you're human, have a conversation, it has been proven scientifically, psychologically that putting a name to the face, putting a voice to the face, it significantly reduces the amount of harm that a police officer may do to a community or an individual just because they now know who this person is. So I know there's like DARE programs in school. Those are typically centered around keeping kids like off drugs. But this we can develop as a program in any community, to be honest, because there are people of color in the suburbs, they're everywhere, right? And poor people, it's not just black people or Black people, Hispanic people, whatever, that are targeted by the police, but also poor white people. So this really would work for everybody, and it just takes everyone plan a little day, go meet the police officers, or you can send an email to the local police chief or even just the captain, and you say, "Listen, I'd really like to have a meeting with you all," and that's that. And you just go and you sit down and you just have a conversation, and then everyone gets to see each other's faces. So if something does happen, I know who you are, you know who I am. There's no storming in. We know who lives at this address, etc. So
Yeah,
I think it's actually a good thing to do.
yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned in your book that I found interesting, and again, I love sociology. Um, so I'm always excited about these different studies. And one of the things that you pointed out that I think people need to remember is like when it came to the war on drugs, right?
Mhm.
It was one thing when that was framed as something affecting people of color. Now you look at the opioid epidemic that's impacting white people, and all of a sudden there's been a shift. And people don't
Yes.
seem to understand that things are never isolated, right?
Yeah.
And there was another study too that I found interesting that talking about the causal roots. There was a study that had both black and white. I don't know that they were police officers. I think that there may have been some, but they were shooters, and they were in a virtual scenario where they were confronted with images of black people and white people with cell phones and/or guns. And it was interesting because you would expect that people of color would be more reserved, not as quick. But it turned out that both groups shot at almost the same rate at the same time, shooting black people with cell phones or no weapons over the white people. And one of the things that the study found was that is rooted in the media perceptions that are carried out. I mean, if you look at like the television shows and movies and the way people of color and minorities are represented, and they found a direct correlation between that. And so it's not just, these are not isolated events. These are not isolated things. And it's not always a case of direct racism. Sometimes it's an unconscious, biases that we have.
Yes.
And people are afraid to admit that they might be biased. It's a very human thing.
Mhm.
And how much of that do you think, or have you found, is just impedes people because they just don't want to admit, hey, because nobody wants to be called a racist, right?
No,
And
they don't.
and the thing is that most people that are racist do not know that they're racist. They do not accept that about themselves.
Right. Yeah. And they seem to be the most like upset when they are
Yes.
in any way suggested to be. I mean, you don't have to call them racist, but just if you suggest that their behavior is biased, they are oftentimes the most upset when they actually do a lot of racist behaviors. And so, you know,
Yeah.
when it comes to the police, we also have to remember how they're trained. And the
Yes.
biases exist there just because we're human. Like we have biases against animals. Like we have already this built-in stigma towards cats versus dogs and, flies versus mosquitoes, etc. Like there's nothing that exists in this world that we don't have some type of stigma about just because we grow up and we get messages. And so the media constantly dishes out these, stigma and all of this marketing that is geared towards certain people and people look this way. It's just now getting to a point where you can see African American people or people that are
Yes.
differently abled, right? Like that's a new thing and I love it. I think it's really cool even to see differently abled children in Target ads. It's amazing. But for pretty much most of humanity, it's like you don't look like this, you're out. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's been around for so long. It's hard to shed these beliefs and these thoughts. And again, the other thing to remember is, yes, how the police department is trained is very, military style. Like everything is militarized. Their equipment, even if they're kind of, their resources are low, they're just taught to act, think later, act first. And that is horrible because there's a lot of times they're entering homes where there's children or there's people with mental health issues. So, yeah,
Yes.
we've got to change that too. And that is another thing. How do we infiltrate the police department in a way that seems logical and doable, because they also have their feelings too, right? They feel like they're being attacked. I know this from having
Yes.
many police officer friends. Police officers feel attacked. They feel like they are not respected in society. They are fearful. I write about that in the book too. Like, again, this is not a popular opinion amongst people who are progressive, but we are literally all human and we are trying to get people to think the way we think all the time and do what we want them to do. But the moment we just try to like understand each person's side and just work on that side, then we can fix something. So if we understand that the police, they do have a hard job. That is a hard job to leave your house and not know if someone's going to shoot you, or if you're going to just do a routine traffic stop and someone's going to like pull a knife out, you have no idea, right? We've
Yeah.
got to understand that. And of course, they have to understand our side as civilians. So again, this comes back to us talking to people, having discussions, and not making, uh, sweeping judgments about people as we often do as human beings. This is again, I'm not so what I want to make clear though is that I'm not saying that police are ever justified in harming civilians. But what I am saying is that we have, and you mentioned this in the beginning when you were speaking, we have become so isolated in our thinking and just so diametrically opposed to just everything. Like someone's vegan and someone eats meat, and we have to just try to be human at this point because that is the only thing that's going to save us is to be human and understand all of our humanity.
Yeah, and that is one thing that she seems like is lacking these days. Is
Yeah.
we seem to be losing our humanity, and a lot of it is just it really irritates me when politicians, and we see this on both sides, when they benefit from this division, and I mean it's just this partisan divide. Again, it's just one side is the enemy, and it's gone to the point where we see dehumanization occurring almost with just this insane frequency.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why we can't just see each other as human beings
Yeah.
and embrace it. Because again, it's if you voted for Donald Trump, you're racist. Well,
Right.
that's just not helpful. Understanding well why did they vote for Donald Trump?
Right.
What are their socioeconomic situations? How do they? I mean, you talk about that in your book as well. You actually referenced a book. I can't remember the title, but it was talking about sort of these white grievances that occur, like in
Yes.
the South, where jobs have left.
Mhm.
Well, again, it's hard for people in those situations to. It's easy to blame. Oh, immigrants took my jobs, right?
Yes.
People don't want to kind of accept that there are changes that happen that is not necessarily anybody's fault. I mean, there are trade deals that we can blame on certain politicians, but for the most part, it's about addressing the root needs, the systemic inequalities that exist. And it just is so. What is so frustrating is just that nobody seems to be addressing. It's always about, like you said, attacking the person. It's about creating an enemy where there doesn't really need to be one.
Yeah. To that, Sean, I really just encourage people to make a plan. And you spoke about this, and I totally agree with you. I think a lot of what you say, I think we're like, I don't know, we're on the same mind. A lot of what you say, I totally agree with because we really just need to talk to each other and build from there. There has to be more work towards conversations instead of protesting, more work towards conversations instead of rioting, conversations instead of bullying. And that is what all of us should do wherever we are. And that is something I also talk about in the book is doing what we can from where we are. So, we only have so much time in a day and we only have so much reach. Each of us only has so much level of influence. I have some influence and, my mom has a different amount. And literally, maybe our sphere of influence is the people on our block or just the people that sit at our kitchen table every night. We can have conversations with those people and work to change their mind just as much as we would work to change their mind about how they eat or what car they drive, right? If we drive a Prius, we want everyone to drive a Prius, or if we drive a Tesla, whatever, we'll talk about that one. But, Teslas, et cetera, electric cars, we talk to people about what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But these things we just complain about. When it comes to society, we are complaining and we are waiting for someone to fix it. And I want us to take charge. It's actually why I started doing advocacy training because I want people to just take charge of themselves first and then what they can control in their environment. And we can control a lot more than we think. One of the things I will say again that I saw as an elected official is that people just were so disempowered, like just, oh, I can't do it, you do it. I remember campaigning and I'd ask people to join a coalition or join a committee, and they'd say, oh, you've got it covered. You can do it. And we got to stop doing that. We have to stop complaining or waiting for someone else to do it. We have to take control of whatever tiny sphere of influence we have and do the work there. It's conversations, it's showing up. If our community consists of people that mostly look like us, have a community night with the police. I don't care how rough and tumble your neighborhood is, do it. I don't care how rough and tumble the police department is, even more so a reason to do it. And those are the things that we really have to make a priority and also practice, not just a one off, but repeatedly. If we're going to have a community night to organize with the police or meet with the police, do it every 6 months, do it every quarter, just so we show up like, hey, we're here. We know who you are. You know who we are, right? If we are going to say that we're going to build a coalition, the coalition can't just exist because, there's one horrible factory going up in the neighborhood. We need to stay active. And I think one of the ways we get people to do that is to keep in touch and to stop calling on people to just do something when we want them to do it, but keep in touch as humans, keep in touch as friends and neighbors, and just keep talking to people. How's your daughter? How's your dog? Etc. And so that's also how we keep people engaged, which I notice people don't do either. They show up when they want something and then they disappear. So we got to stay in for the long haul.
We're going to take a quick break.
Oh.
I'm so sorry. Real quickly, I just need to fix this echo that.
Oh, okay. There's an echo. Okay. No
We'll be
problem.
right back.
Thanks.
Why am I getting? Okay. There we go. So sorry.
No problem. No problem.
Much better. Yeah, there was like this echo.
Oh.
I was hearing you twice, and I sometimes I didn't know when you were finished because it.
Okay. I did
this is
notice,
fun.
I noticed a pause, but not to worry, not to worry.
Oh,
Technology is just not happy with us right now. It's fine.
We're gonna have to name this show "Technical Issues" today or something
Oh.
because it's just been a battle. But this is so good to finally hear you clearly again. Yeah, again, I love your book.
Thank you.
I can't wait to finish it. It reminds me a lot. There's another book that I absolutely love. And my producer actually mentioned this to me today. She's like, this monologue that you wrote, it seems like you borrowed, is this from your book? And I'm like, no, it's from, it was inspired by Edna's book. And she's like, really? And the other book is called Creating Freedom by Raul Martinez.
Oh.
And many people haven't. I don't even know how I found this book, but definitely it talks so much about the idea of personal responsibility and how it goes into the neuroscientific aspects about how these biases that we have are not only are they systemic, but they're fundamentally flawed in terms of how we think about society. Like the whole idea of imprisonment, for instance.
Yeah.
The idea that it comes down to people, when we talk about personal responsibility, we're not accounting for the circumstances underlying why people do certain things. Not everybody is equal in opportunities. We don't choose to be born impoverished. We don't choose to be born in certain areas. And the book really woke me up, and it just, your book reminds me so much of that because it talks about how you have to rethink the relationships that you have with other people and with yourself too, because it's so easy to fall into these traps. And so I just wanted to point that out to you. I don't mean to ramble, but I love your book, and I really want people. And now your book is Make Humanity Great, not Make Humanity Great Again, right?
It's Make Humanity Great Again, but it's actually okay. But it's okay because it's kind of like a play on the fact that it never was, right? To many people it was, and that's what people are aspiring to now, right? That was one of the reasons why the insurrection happened on January 6th, and it is because there are so many people that believe America was great before it became what it is now, where we're trying to move in a direction of being more accepting of different people. And to some people, that is threatening, that is bad, and that is making America horrible. Of course, to people like you and I, we think that's making America great. So depends on who you ask, right? Was America ever great? But yeah, that is, why I had the title. And it's interesting because I really, when writing the book, had no idea how completely chaotic things are going to get as years went on. Like really,
Yes, no
I really
kidding.
had no idea. Um, I was literally feeling just so frustrated with the inaction of people. Like I was just so, as you said, frustrated with people just talking and sitting and not doing anything. One of the reasons why I ran for office, and one of the reasons why I have been an advocate and an activist pretty much since I came out the womb, is because I would see, talking to anyone, that most people are just nervous to do anything. And so it is really what inspired me to get people to take a look at ways they can do something, but also to recognize that just because things have been great for you does not mean it's been great for a lot of people. You talked about the prison system. A lot of people do not think about what it feels like to be incarcerated, because most of us walking around think that that would never happen. But I could share stories of people who literally did nothing and they ended up there, and
Yeah,
so we have to consider that, and I appreciate that you touch on that as well. And I talk about that a little bit in the book as well, about different courts, specialty
yes.
courts, which are actually popping up more now, that deal with people based on the crime and also based on their background, as opposed to just, a blanket, conviction for everyone, which is never right.
Yeah, and we have these like mandatory minimum sentences
Right.
that are just, you know, in the show that yesterday when I did my monologue, I talked about a gentleman who was given 2 life sentences
Hmm.
for, and it was basically for marijuana possession, but it turned out that he had prior convictions that were like over a decade ago, and this is a person that was on the right track, had a little bit of marijuana, which is legal in many states now, right? And he wasn't selling. This was mere possession, and the federal court of appeals just upheld his conviction, so he will never be released. No probation, no parole, and to me, this is just like, what is this accomplishing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not only is this potentially going to create a cycle with this person, this guy's family. I mean, you've thrown away a life, and sometimes I tell people slavery did not really end with the Civil War. It got rebranded, and it became the prison system. And if you even look at how many prisons use prisoners for labor, I mean, it seems as though there's sort of this incentive. There's not a lot of incentive to release people or to work on
Recidivism.
rehabilitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about, and the recidivism is incredibly high. Where when you look at these progressive proposals or other countries, they have a much lower rate of recidivism.
Hmm.
So I don't think people understand. I don't think people understand that there's other incentive, especially the privatization of prisons, which to me is just a crime against humanity. I mean, to profit off of what is essentially human suffering,
Yep.
is abhorrent to me.
Yeah.
We're criminalizing homelessness in some parts
Yep.
of the country. I mean,
Mhm.
these are not solutions. Prison is not a solution. It's a reaction to a problem that's going unaddressed.
Yeah.
And yeah,
No, I mean it's like anything else, like reacting to the immediate behavior of a pet or a child, Uh, the long-term work has to come with behavioral changes on the part of the leader and also the constituent or, community member. And so there really isn't any reward for someone who leaves prison after they've been there for so long, because it's so hard to acclimate to the real world. So they do end up going back, as we talked about recidivism. And that is what it would appear to be what the system wants to happen. There is so
Yeah.
much incentive to keep people in there because, as many people probably don't realize, it's a business. Like hospitals, like colleges, the prison system is a business, and it isn't designed to get people rehabilitated and back into society and functioning as, healthy members. It is really designed for them to be slaves. And the only way to change that would be, again, for us as civilians and community members to speak up against this in a different way. Right now, there is no incentive for politicians to change this, and there's really no incentive for them to change too much of anything,
Yeah.
because one of the things I know from being in politics is that it's a completely different world. It's almost, I liken it to, and this is really funny, I liken it to like Greek mythology, where like all the Greek gods and goddesses are like on a cloud. And, perhaps politicians are not quite as graceful, and they definitely don't seem to be as poised and powerful,
No.
but they are in their own realm. And I know, because I experienced that even in local politics, that we are so separate as leaders from the people that we're actually leading. So especially the longer you've been in politics. So it is not even a relatable situation. So again, it is not enough for us to just go to Congress people or write letters. It's literally having a conversation with them. And then I want to stress this point too, because politics has its place and it can be a really great means to making change. But we have to, as everyday citizens, hold these people accountable in a way that they've never seen before. And I don't mean that in a threatening way. I mean that in a way, I'm like, in a way they've never seen before. I mean it in a way that they cannot deny what's being said. We have to show up at meetings, at hearings, etc. And not just two people, a mom and a kid, or the one person who was wronged, but legions of people. And this is, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about building. And I mentioned this in the book as well. Building is so important. And another thing I want to stress too is resource building, right? Not just building coalitions of people to come in and do something, but we are at the point where progressives really don't understand how much power they are letting like slip through their fingers. And I want to stress to progressive people that are listening that, as much as we're afraid, because I know I'm not afraid of it, but a lot of progressive people are afraid of money. They are afraid of capitalism. They are afraid of the almighty dollar. But guess what? That is what makes the world go round. And it is time for progressives to not only build coalitions and build power, but to make some money and get together and use that money to change the system. Because talking, protesting, none of it is working as much, because these politicians have the NRA in their pocket and their ear and everywhere else. There's attorneys. There's so many people that are vying for their interest. And they really don't have time to listen to somebody that's broke and has no power, because that is what talks now. And everyone just has to know that. It's always what talked. But right now, in this world that we live in, we have to do something. And there's more ways than ever to build and to, fundraise and et cetera. So when we look at politicians, I can't remember, I was listening to NPR the other day. It was a Republican, had already, I think, 6 million in her coffers already, to campaign. And yet we have progressives that are running for office. They can't make change because they're not raising money. We have to get with progressives that have resources and then be the progressives that have resources too, so we can help each other. So when someone's running, they're not trying to run a campaign with like $1,000 against someone who has like $7 million in their account. It's impossible. That there are races where it can be done. I will be the first to say that in New Jersey, actually, this past year, there was a Republican who ran against a senator, and he had very little campaign funds, and he won and beat out a Democrat, and he was a Republican, and just through grassroots efforts. So that can definitely be done. But we've got to do all of it. Like, we really have to do all of it. If we're going to change the prison system, if we're going to change economics, if we're going to change racism, all of it, environment, we've got to have resources and we've got to have the people. We just got to get together, and we've got to get past all of our hangups about what money looks like in capitalism and all of these other things, and just build on those two fronts alone.
Well, one of the problems is just the amount of money in politics. And I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, I mean, when you look at how much it costs to run for Congress,
Yeah.
I mean, that right there is just, it's very segregated because most people are never going to be able to have a chance.
Right.
So it really, you do have a better shot locally, but what was it like with your campaign? Did you find that there was, because it must be irritating to have to constantly worry about, raising money when you're trying to actually advocate for change.
Yeah, I will say I was pretty lucky when I ran for office because, I think I'll be honest, no one really knew what a ball buster I was, excuse my French. But I just appeared to be like this nice little lady, mom with little kids that just wanted to run. And my husband, I propped him up and he looked neat. And, so I was just pretty unassuming. So when I was asked to run, and I was asked a number of times, I think it was more so because I didn't seem threatening. And which is a shame to say, but I think it's true. A lot of women that get into politics in the initial round is usually because they're not intimidating and they look like they will be malleable. And I will be the first to admit, in my case, perhaps that is what was seen initially. So I didn't really have to raise money in my campaign for the beginning. And I did a lot of grassroots things. So even if money needed to be raised, I really didn't need so much. I literally walked day and night. I canvassed my neighborhood. I found people, and I didn't have like a whole bunch of people walk with me. It was, I made a schedule. I said, hey, can you walk with me? And every week I had a schedule going of people that would walk door to door with me. And that's what I did. And on a local election, that's going to work, majority of the time, because people want to see the face of the people that they're electing. And it worked. I was really surprised at how effective it was, actually, but I was always told that that was the most effective way to win an election locally. Of course, on the grand scale, yeah, it's ridiculous how much money has to be raised in order to win Congress, Senate. I have a friend who, she's since left politics, but she was running for Congress, and in order to be considered, they told her she had to raise, I believe, a minimum of $150,000
Yeah.
just to be considered, not even to literally be given the line, but to be considered. And in New Jersey, that is a huge issue right now, is the line. There's a lot of activist organizations that are working against this whole line, which is essentially, just to explain to people listening and watching now, in New Jersey, and I believe in other states as well, there is a political line system where if you're a Democrat, you pretty much get chosen to be on the ballot. If you're a Republican, you're pretty much chosen to be on the ballot. So the person that you see when you go into that voting booth is not really who you picked. It's who the powers that be picked. It's who the party bosses picked. And so that is how a lot of people end up in Congress. It's how Joe Biden ended up being president.
Oh,
It's
jeez.
the well, right. It's the comfort level of the party bosses. And a lot of people think that they're picking who they want, and you're not. This person was already handpicked before you even went into that voting booth. They're just giving you the choices that they thought were the best, or that they were the most comfortable with. And when I say party bosses, I'm talking about Democratic chairs or Republican chairs, whether that's the county level, state level, and then up to the federal level. But that is typically how decisions are made in terms of who gets put on the ballot. So you will see people that are off the line, which means that they might have raised their own funds and they weren't, part of the political machine. And it is harder for them to win. And, that's why I speak again about resources. I don't think it's okay that it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars just to run for Congress.
Yeah.
I think it's horrible. And again, I know so many groups that are fighting against this. But in the interim, we got to do something. In the interim, we're just not going to get in if we're waiting for that to change, because I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, because it is keeping people out, and it is keeping the current people who are in power. It's keeping them in the position of choosing and handpicking, right? If someone else has enough money to come in, they can get in the door, but then I'm going to tell you too, there's going to be another problem once they get in the door. That problem is just that you now are faced with the reality of having to either acquiesce to the current power or be your own power. And that's pretty hard for people to do. So even when progressives get into office, they have to be so careful about what they decide to do when they get in there. For me personally, I knew there were certain conversations I was not going to be okay with. There were a lot of racist things said. There were a lot of anti-immigrant things said, and I was not okay with it. And I was not okay with sitting still and being quiet about it. But for many people who run for office, eventually they learn like, okay, if I want to survive here, I either got to listen to this and not say anything, turn my head, or speak up. But then if I speak up, I lose money,
Yeah.
I lose support, I might lose the line. So if we coalesce, if we have resources, if we get more of us in there, we don't have to do that anymore. But we're, again, so busy worried about if this person's anti this or pro that, that we're not getting anybody in office. So when we get one of us in there, it's like piranhas are attacking. So,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we gotta kind of do the hard stuff. And I know it is challenging for progressives to understand and do that work, but we have to, we're playing chess with people here who are playing like a way more challenging game. I don't know. My husband can name some other games. We're kind of like playing like Connect Four where people are playing chess. So, and we've got to realize that. Like if they've got all the power and the tools, we've got to get some of that too. And we've got to go sometimes through traditional means to get it. And that might be what we do for now.
One of the things that worries me the most is
Yeah.
that there's a lot of hope was given to the progressives, the squad, if you
Mm.
will, and a lot of people just feel disenchanted at this point. I mean, there's been so many opportunities for the squad to have stood up, and if they would have coalesced, I mean, they could have
Yeah.
accomplished a lot more. But for whatever reason, and it's kind of like you say, there's this tendency to acquiesce to the existing power structure. And what worries me is that other progressives are going to say, well, see, this didn't work. We're not getting anywhere. Just give up. I mean, when you look at how many people do not vote in this country, a large portion of them are just have come to the conclusion that it's just not, they don't represent us, and that's not going to change.
Yeah.
Um, How do you think we can overcome that? I mean, and I want to just, before you answer, I just want to say
Yeah.
I was infurious with Joe Biden being the nominee. And I was mostly angry at the media for not holding. I mean, he has said some, I'm going to say it, racist things in the
Yeah.
past that I find very concerning. Then there's this
Yeah.
crime bill, and it just seems like he has not. And then there was that. Did you hear about the leaked conversation with civil rights leaders? I mean, these are.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I've heard about like conversations that he had with, I mean, I've heard the actual clips of conversations he had with different talk show hosts. Yeah, it sounded really bad. And I realized that he could say that because he already knew that he was going to get put in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about. Like the machine just works that way. Whether anyone liked it or not, he was already slotted for the position. And I worry, I was talking to a friend about this the other day. I worry that we don't have anyone else to put up going forward. There's no one ready for 2024 that's going to be, ready and waiting and it's going to be a viable candidate. I mean, I highly doubt that Biden would be put forward. I don't know where Kamala Harris is. I'm assuming that maybe she's being told to sit in the shadows for now because, I haven't really seen too much of her. But, unfortunately, again, that is the way politics works. And, Biden might be put up again or someone who looks just like him because he's a safe bet. And no matter what people say, in public or private, that's all we're handed. So that's what we vote for. And then Democrats come around every term and they say, hey, well, this is what we got. Like, let's just vote for it. And that's what everyone did. People voted for Hillary. I mean, she didn't win, but that's kind of been our strategy, which is not really a strategy. The strategy should be get real people in there that we know are going to do what we want. And you mentioned this in your opener. We are so consumed with looking at people's personality, what they have on, oh, where did they grow up? Where did they go to school? All important things, by the way. If someone comes in wearing a clown costume, I don't think they should be president. However, I think we got to like put that on the back burner for a little bit. We got Trump because people were afraid of Hillary. Did I love Hillary? No. But we also didn't create somebody else. And that is literally what we have the power to do as constituents, is to create someone else. We can say, I really like that Beto guy, or and then push him forward. Say, I will not take anything else. I will not take anything less, more, or anywhere sideways. I want this person. And we're not doing that. We're allowing the powers that be to make the choices for us, put them on the ballot, and then we just walk into the booth and we just pick from the 3 people that we don't even want to pick from.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. I will be the first to admit it is a lot of work, but so is everything else. One of the reasons why we have computers and tables and everything else is because at some point someone envisioned that we would sit in chairs and we would have tables and we would build cities. And so this is another huge undertaking that we are going to have to do as a society, to change a system and to change structures that we see now and make them look amazing in the future, and that's really what it takes.
Yeah, one of the things, and I get in so much trouble with people on Facebook for this and on Twitter, is I tend to be very harsh on Democrats like
Oh,
Joe Biden. And one of the reasons for that I do that is, first off, you already know what to expect from Republicans as far as policies and so forth. So there's no surprise there. But you have to be willing to criticize your own. You have to be willing to see people's flaws. And if you even suggest that something that Biden said might have been racist, oh, you're a Trumper. Or now the big thing is, oh, you're repeating Russian talking points. You're a Putin puppet. And it's like, if you're not willing to be objective, right, how can you, it's almost like it's not even, you lose the ability to even criticize the other side at that point.
yeah.
And we're never going to get good candidates if we can't be honest. Like, no, there is issues that we have to address. And we can't just give people a pass for behavior or flawed policies
Yeah.
that they have. And that's what's most frustrating to me, is that we can't even seem to talk amongst ourselves in an honest and objective way. I mean, it's either, or it's like, well, okay, he may have said something racist, but look at what Trump is a racist, and I can give you a whole list. Yeah, but that doesn't make it okay, right? I mean, I'm looking for somebody that, I had a lot of hope for President Obama, and I understand he had a mountain of obstacles in front of him. But one of the things that I was hoping is that he would be more radical, especially when it came to issues of inequality among the Black community. And I mean, the whole beer summit that he did, I mean, I kind of get that, but I wanted to see policies, right? I wanted to see actual reform, and it just seemed as though, and all Republicans had to do was just sort of hint, oh, he's playing the black card, or like when it came to the release of the FBI report on radical extremism from the right wing, they played this card, and I just wanted to see him more radical. I wanted to see, because that was an opportunity, and he had so much political capital. And I think he did the best that he could in many circumstances. I mean, given, again, the opposition that he faced, which I thought was just such blatant racism for the most part. I mean, is that too much to add? I mean,
Is it? I've heard people say that about President Obama a lot, that he didn't do enough. People in my family, a lot of people. Oh, for sure, for sure. I've heard a lot of Black and brown people complain about his time in office. I think it is a lot to ask. And I say this now as a person who is experienced. I've experienced what it's like to be on the other side and be elected, and you only have but so much time to get things done. but you also, as you stated, have so much to work against. It's an uphill battle, and especially in his case, and even in my case, being in local politics, there's so much to battle and come up against. And so that also makes it challenging to fight the powers that be already, right? He came in there as a Black man. He came in there knowing he had children, a wife. So it also makes it dangerous. There's a lot of Black and brown people that speak up, and it's dangerous for them. Another point that he brought up was that no one actually said anything. And this is very true in politics. And I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. But when I was on council, a lot of people would reach out to me via email, they call me and they say, hey, I want us to change this, or can you fix this? And I'd have to tell people, sure, I think I probably can, but can you show up to the meeting? Because I've got like 8 other people here that have to vote on this with me, and I'm the only one that thinks this way. So I need you to show up. And that is one of the things that, President Barack Obama mentioned, is that he tried to change things. He tried to change policies for people of color, but as an elected official, you have to still go about it a certain way. And that means having the community that wants to be served show up. If I, as a councilwoman, just decide, we need a pool in this community, but the community consists of like, I don't know what doesn't, dogs, I don't know. If it's somebody that doesn't swim, it doesn't really matter. That's my personal opinion. I'd need my constituents, my base, to come out and say, I want this, and for them to fight for it, for them to speak up for it. And I think that's what happened a lot of times during his tenure, is that people did not say what they wanted, but they wanted so much. So, he did speak up for people that showed up and that were present and made direct requests. But we make an assumption too that Black people all want the same things, and we
Right.
don't. People of color don't always need or want the same things, and that is okay. And it's something that also has to be understood by constituents too. I can't expect a Black politician to get in and fight for things the way I want them to, or to fight for the things that I need. And that, I think, went in the case of Barack Obama, in the case of so many elected officials that I talk to, that I'm friends with to this day. I was having friends with an elected official. She's a mayor in a town in New Jersey, and that is one of her grievances, is that people ask for a lot, but then when it is time to show up and speak up for it, they don't. And from the standpoint of an elected official, you have to convince the other people to side with you and vote with you. And if it's just you complaining or saying something, they're not going to get the point. Elected officials slash politicians usually are compelled to do things by votes. And that is the fact. They are going to make moves because they think they're going to lose a vote or gain a vote. So constituents, again, need to come out and show, I will take away your vote, or I will give my vote based on your behavior. So that's, again, our power as constituents and as community members.
That's hard to do. I mean,
Mm.
because, and I say this the same thing all the time to people, if you're not willing to withhold your vote, then you're relinquishing the power that you do have as a voter.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I understand in this climate of fear that we have, it's like, oh, but if we don't, then somebody worse is going to get elected. We'll reelect Donald Trump, or we'll reelect. And my point is, yeah, but to what end? I mean, we're moving, it seems, further and further to the right in this country.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of the time the Democrats enable, or if not
Mhm.
outright empower this.
Yes.
And yeah, we may end up with somebody like a Donald Trump in Congress or what have you for a term. But if we can send a message to the Democratic Party to, hey, we need you to change the power structure. We need you to focus on the issues that are actually impacting people on the ground, then the next election cycle could be a lot different. But people seem to be more, it's all about the short term, sort of
Yeah.
rewards, and not wanting to suffer in the short term for a longer term gain. And it just seems like both parties, love this culture of fear because it just, again, it enables them to hold on to power.
Yeah. If you look at politics and politicians specifically, they really are not designed to do anything else but win. Hospitals are
Yeah.
not designed to do anything but bring sick people in and possibly help them. And this is what's happening, right? Politics is really not designed to help people. And I don't know if it ever was. I think there's some talk that it was. If I read history books, it sounds like maybe it was, but that quickly veered off. And so that's what we have. We have a system designed where it's simply people just wanting to get elected again. That's it. That's why we have people who have been in office for 20 years, 30 years plus, because it's all about, let me just get in office again. And it's not about helping the people that they're supposed to help. So it definitely is a long-term game. It's so much a long-term game. It's not even funny. And we are not treating it as such, as constituents and as, members of our society at large. And, I think it is going to take, as I mentioned, for us to really, really just stand up to what's going on right now. And I think it might require, maybe not voting in mass, which is kind of happening already, or really, really speaking up to local powers, because again, politics is local, and all the people that you see up top typically started in like local, smaller offices. So, I don't really want to talk about this gentleman, but I'll bring it up. There's someone that I know in politics who actually helped me when I first got in. And we later found out, we meaning a lot of people in our local Democratic Party, that he was a very, very staunch, like not only Republican, but kind of racist and a lot of other things, angry, misogynistic, like the list goes on. And so it kind of became our, I guess, our work to stop him from moving forward, because we knew, as we saw him do, that he was going to run for Congress, Senate, Assembly, whatever larger seats he could get, and then just keep building from there. And that is what, again, we have to do as individuals, is when we put our good people up front, we have to back them, we have to be there for them, we have to show up at meetings, we have to show up. It is work, it is a long game. Build little clusters of people who can do this. Build clusters of people that can show up to this thing and show up to that thing. And it doesn't take a million people, but it might take a few dozen, and that's okay. But we have to do that long game kind of thinking. We have to remember that the politicians you see up there is because no one stopped them. They were on the friggin' PTA. No one stopped them when they were on the school board. I can look at school boards across this country, and they are all mini Donald Trumps. Like they are literally, there's like a machine right now spitting out these little mini conservatives that are like, and they're just saying a lot of racist things. And this is because the conservative side is doing a really good job of putting fear into their constituents. And they're doing a good job of supporting each other. And
Yes.
I agree with you. As Democrats, we are not supporting each other. We're not paying attention to anything. They are. People are watching Fox News like nobody's business. And all the people that agree with that are doing whatever they're being told to do. They're not splintering off and saying, oh, you're only racist against Puerto Ricans. I don't like you. Oh, you're only, oh, you're racist against anybody. Love you. Let's work together. And as Democrats, we have to do that too. As progressives, we have to do that too. What are you for? Let's not think about what you're against. Are you for something good? Are you for something that's going to improve the world? Let's stand together. Let's band together. And let's stop people from getting into the system, the political system, that are going to grow and be fed like monsters and eventually become, the next congressman in our, community, et cetera. And, I think this all sounds like a lot of work. Like this really, and it is not easy. None of it is easy, but it just takes a few people to grow and a few more people and then just grow and grow and grow. It is like what we see on the right. And I hate to use them as a comparison or as any template for what we should do as progressives. But sometimes you have to study the enemy to know how to fight the enemy. And we've got to do that. I think what we keep doing is trying to solve it in our own ways, and it's not working. It's not working to write a sign on a piece of cardboard and stick it up somewhere. It's going to work if we can afford a more expensive sign. It's going to work if we show up. I'll give you an example too. And I reference this because I have so many really great stories from being in elected office, though it was like torment for me because I did not I did not enjoy being an elected official because of the town I was in, because my views and my perspective were so different than a lot of my constituency base. But I did like when I could help people. Like that part I loved. When someone asked me for help and I could do it, I loved that. That was the best. And that was why I ran for office. But one of the things I saw oftentimes, my counterparts up there, my colleagues on the council were all conservative. I was the only one. The mayor was conservative, all the other council people, and the council people, there were 9 of us. I was the only one that was progressive. And
Wow.
there would be people that would come to the meetings that were like pro marijuana or social justice advocates, and they would be unkempt or stammer or yell or be incoherent sometimes, just all over the place. And a lot of times they were not respected, they were pushed out of the building, they were mocked and teased right to their face. If not, when they walked out, sometimes, the other council people didn't even wait. They'd mock them right to their face. And I look at how progressives have gone about things. And there is, again, this thought that, sure, we can just show up, be who we are. Yes, be who you are, but clean it up a little bit and get some structure, get some intention behind what you're doing, understand that in this world, for me, I might have to code switch sometimes. I don't like it, but sometimes we have to play the enemy's game to win and defeat the enemy. And that is, that's one of the most crucial things I can say. It sounds manipulative. It sounds so, adverse to what a lot of times progressives think, but yeah.
But it's, you had, like you said, if you're not willing to fight,
Yeah.
then you're giving up. And
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think it's
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page, Sean.
And you mentioned too in your book about the corruptibility of power.
Yes.
Even I love the story that you made about the managers.
Yeah.
They started out as friends, and these power struggles. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the reasons why we probably should have term limits.
Yes.
For
Yes.
members of
Absolutely.
Congress.
Yeah.
And
For everybody.
what can we do to get you to run for Congress?
Oh, I'll do it. I thought about it. Like I said, politics is, I tell you, it is not for the faint at heart. It really isn't.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it is. It is a place. The good thing is that I was not raised in a way that I was, held with, delicate gloves, as they say. I'm thinking of a term of expression. So, I have the toughness in me to handle it. You know, when people get, and I keep saying that I touched on things. I did. I touched on this too. When people get into office, it is the only parallel I can think of off top is when, there's diversity initiatives in a corporation, right? They'll say, oh, we need to bring in more diverse talent. So they might bring in like 2 or 3 people. They're like, okay, the HR lady's Black. This guy in that department's Puerto Rican and that guy's Indian. Great. We did it. What ends up happening to those 3 people? They're not in the same department. They don't look like each other entirely. They don't even know each other exist in this like corporation of like 500 people. And they individually experience microaggressions, or individually they experience harassment. So now what do? They either quit or they stay there and they just like, smile and wave, so to speak, so they can, stay in their job and feed their families. And this is what happens a lot of times in politics too. You get people, I will use myself as an example and so many other people that I befriended when I was campaigning. We get in these places and there is no one there. It is just us. And we are fighting. When I tell you the level of just like angst and probably gastrointestinal issues that I got, like, reflux and everything else, sleepless nights, it is because we end up being alone. And so, you know, that is really the way to challenge the status quo, is to get as many of us in there as possible. And again, goes back to, we got to build the way we can build, the way that is going to be the most effective. It is probably, we're not going to get people in office just because they really have a good message. I hate to say that. I wish it was so. We are going to get people in office because they are liked by a larger constituency. That is how we get people in office. We literally have to do what's been done and then change it. Like they say, you get in and then you change it from within. Uh, it's tough to do, when you are the only voice. I was the only one who spoke up against racism. It was tough. I see so many other politicians, like you talked about the squad. They were getting so many death threats. That is not sustainable. It's not sustainable as a human being to be threatened day in and day out, to walk to your car and not know if someone's going to attack you, especially if it's a woman politician. Oh, heck, if it's a man. Nobody wants to, assume, that risk. No one wants to deal with that. And so you have people who either fall out and they leave and they're like, I'm not going to do this anymore, or they just become a part of the system. And that is what you will see like 90% of the time. They will become a part of the system because it's easier. It's just easier. And so, let's get it. Let's do what we can do. Let's, join forces with each other, get each other into office, and get each other elected, and keep money behind each other and keep power behind each other, show up for each other, and then get someone else in. So that way, when we get into office, it's not just this one lone wolf who's just, just fighting everything off. And it's like they're fighting people off with a wet noodle or something. It's not going to work. So eventually they have to give up and go, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call. It's a tough call, but it can be done.
And one of the other things that I encourage people to do too is mutual aid within
Yes.
communities. Things like food banks too.
Yeah.
Starting co-ops. Building a base of power, as
Mhm.
you said, in a way that is sustainable and environmentally friendly. But and again, we need to be able to support each other in these endeavors, because again, it's not easy, as you said.
Yeah.
But mutual aid is in particular. There's a number of different organizations in various communities that are, and the whole idea of mutual aid is just, again, helping those within the community, whether it's diapers or food or going out and helping the homeless, or there's so many things that the average person can do. And one of the things I love about your book too is you talked about the simplest thing you can do is whenever you are talking to somebody about a bad news headline, counter that with something good, something positive. You've got so many examples in your book of things that people can do that it's just, I love the book. I can't wait to finish it.
Thank you.
It's just, I found it very inspiring, and
Thank
I
you
want
so
people to get the book. I really
Oh,
do.
good. Thank you. Thank you.
And you're a wonderful writer. I hope that you
Oh, thank
continue
you.
writing, because the way
I
that you
am
tell
writing.
good,
Yeah.
because you're able to weave together a story with personal experiences. I just love your book. I love the way that it's. I think I read like around a few hundred pages just within the first few days. It was
Thank
very
you.
difficult to put down. I had the Kindle version.
Oh, Sean, thank you so much. Thank you.
No,
I
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
writing it.
It came really from a place of frustration, and I unfortunately still have the same frustrations, and you and I both do. It really
Yes,
came from a place of
absolutely.
trying to help people to figure out what to do, because it still is that so many people are just feeling hopeless and unsure of what they can do. We're bombarded with so many messages and so many distractions, and we have to stop being distracted and just stay on course. Like you said, mutual aid is great, and that's also a way to build a a following, to build people who then might vote for you one day. And people,
Yeah.
another thing that people do, they go, oh, that looked cool, that looked easy, let me run for office. And they forget the fact that you need people to know who you are to vote for you. You know, people always jump in and say, I'm going to run for office. Well, yeah, good luck. But does anyone even know that you exist? And if you're going to run for a larger office, yeah, you better be out there feeding babies and children and kissing them and everything else, appropriately, of course. But, you know, be out there in the world and in your community at large and let people know who you are. And then, you know, run for office, or you know, because it's a long process to run for office, but it goes by very quickly. And it's better to start it from a position of someone knowing who you are, whether it's your PTA uh, colleagues or cohorts, or you know, just people that live within your local community. So I do appreciate all that you're saying, and I really hope that this helps someone, or many people, of course. But I definitely hope that it can bring some light and some levity to what's going on.
Well, and again, you know, it's just it's what I'll use the word frustrating again, because
Mhm.
people just have, again, it's so tribal. And when I
Yeah,
talk to people, I'm like, look, if there's somebody who's racist, who's working to do something that is going to benefit social justice, I don't need to like them. I
right.
don't need to agree with them. I will work with them to get that one thing done. And then in the process, hopefully work to change them as well, to change
Yeah.
their perspective, to change their views. I'm not
Hmm.
going to just say, no, you're not on my team. And I'm surprised that how difficult that is for people to comprehend this idea that, no, I won't work with that person because they're against such and such. And it's like, then you're basically just letting them. You're not willing to fight to get what, I mean, you can
Yeah.
find common ground with just about anyone.
Yeah,
And
you can. We don't know that though. You know, a lot of people don't know that. I often talk to progressives who are really, of course, good people, but they are so angry and bitter at anyone who does not think the way they do. And they do not realize how completely disruptive that is to not only their internal being, but also to the movement, right? The movement needs people who don't look like us and don't think like us. And I have to say this to people of all diasporas. There are brown people who don't want white people to be a part of the movement to help black people. But we need everybody. You know, the black population is, you know, at this point, maybe 13, 14%. Some statistics say 11% of, you know, the American base in population. And so we are going to need more than 13% of people to be with us. You know, that's really not a great number. And, you know, I hate to put that out there, but I mean, that's the truth. You know, the Jewish community has dwindled in number, unfortunately. And so all of these communities need more people, and we cannot push away the help because the help doesn't look like us, or the help might say something that's off-putting. Educate them, educate these people who are saying offensive things, but then, you know, say, okay, like I'm gonna let it slide this time, but you know, learn from this and let's move on. Like, let's work together. And eventually, if someone's working with a certain population, you know, they will get more awareness of what they're doing, and they'll be, you know, told a few times, if not more, yeah, hey, that's not okay, or that's not acceptable language to use, or that's actually racist. And that's what we have to do. We really, you know, we can't turn away anybody who's working right now toward getting us in a better position as a society.
well, and you know, and you just reminded me of something else too. The and this kind of goes to the whole cancel culture, where a
Yeah.
lot of people, right now, especially within the transgender issues that are kind of going
Mm.
on, so many of my friends, and sometimes myself as well, are afraid to engage because you're afraid that you
Mm.
might say something accidentally that is offensive or that's wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that too. I mean, obviously, with racial issues, anything to do with race is people. There's a fear factor there, and it's just get if we could just get over our own fear and insecurity, and partly allow ourselves to say something that might be offensive, and then learn from that, like, oh, okay, well, I didn't mean it that way, or oh,
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. It just seems like we are a society that is so driven by fear of each
Yeah.
other, that we're not we're we're just kind of digging ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper,
Oh, we are. We are.
and So yeah,
Fear
you
sells.
yes,
Yeah, fear
and
sells.
be courage and fearsome, and be willing to admit that you might be wrong. That you again, I do have no question. I'm sure that I've got all sorts of biases. I mean, it's not something that you're conscious of, but you become conscious of it when you engage with others and you learn from that. It's just I see so many people afraid that they might expose themselves or they might you know, and it's just. But if you're not going to have the conversations, then and
Yeah,
again, you mentioned this in your book, the whole thing about being silence.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. Not all silence is golden, for
yes,
sure.
no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. Being silent is one of the worst things we can do in many situations. If we see a child being hurt, being silent is one of the worst things we can do. And on this larger scale, we see so many people being harmed, and we see the democracy that should exist in a more stable and, I think, in a more accepting way for all people. We see it being, it's deteriorating right before our eyes. And, it should be this country, I'd say really the world should be a place where all people feel welcome, safe, etc. And we see that crumbling day after day, and us being silent. It's just, I mean, what do we expect to happen, right? What do we expect to happen? And I there's so many examples in our history of civilizations that crumbled because the
yeah,
people who knew something was going wrong, or this doesn't look right, this isn't working right, didn't speak up loud enough, and then everything fell apart. And so, I know to a lot of people that seems like an extreme statement, when people say, oh, this is similar to what happened to Jews during Hitler's reign. I think it is there is so much to be learned from history. And it while it sounds like an extreme statement to say that what's going on now could eventually lead to concentration camps or slavery again, I think the people who are trying to pass laws to stop women from controlling their own bodies,
hmm
um, people who are trying to pass law or who already have passed laws to stop people from voting would probably be okay with slavery coming back again too. Probably maybe actually be okay with concentration camps too. I don't know. From what I've heard from a lot of elected officials that are going in that direction, it doesn't sound like a far stretch, unfortunately, and that is scary and that is extreme, but that's what we're dealing with. So
no, and you're absolutely right, and that's what people need to understand. It absolutely can happen here.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody, I mean, in Germany, those people did not imagine that. I mean, they heard the
right.
rhetoric. They're like,
Yep.
oh, well, it's just rhetoric. That can't happen. And that's what we have to be very conscious of, is that
Yeah.
it can happen, and it happens precisely when people get into that mentality, this false sense of security.
Yes. But
And
I somehow I'm still hopeful, Sean. I'm still hopeful. And
yes,
I am hopeful because I know that when I look at kids that are like my son's age, he's just turned 15. I almost called him 14, so he can't hear me, so it's okay. 14, but he's 15 now. But when I look at kids his age, and even youngsters that are slightly older than that, I look at their lack of acceptance of the crap, which is another reason why they're not voting too. Because they're
yes,
like, I don't like this person. I'm not even going to waste my energy. And that is not great. But I will say that their lack of accepting what is currently going on is what is going to compel them to change it. It's what's compelling them to do it now. And I love that, about we talk about younger generations, but yeah, with every younger generation, with every new generation comes innovation in technology, but also innovation in thought. And that's what we're
yeah,
seeing now. And we don't have to wait for them to do it. Again, we can be the masters of creation here. No matter what age we are, we can do something as well. And like I said in the beginning of this conversation and throughout it, I believe it's just, let's build where we are. Let's change conversations where we are. It doesn't require a fight physically all the time. It does not always require a protest or yelling or rioting. It very much looks like quietly building power and then having discussions, quietly building
Yeah.
resources and having discussions. And to be honest, that's probably the healthiest way to do this too, because in the process of rioting and screaming and fighting and so much chaos and opposition, we're also burning ourselves out.
Yes.
So the best way for us to move forward is to do things in a way that is healthy for us, but is getting the job done. And all those other things, they're not getting the job done anyway. So why bother? Yelling is not getting the job done. Me trying to argue with someone who thinks that, you know, they're being replaced, it's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna change their mind. They're not gonna change my mind. I don't think they're gonna be replaced. They don't agree with me. So why don't I do something else? Why don't I build with the people that I know are for what I want, and let's move. Let's just move in droves and get things done.
Absolutely. I want
Yeah.
to thank you so much for being
Oh,
gracious
you're
with your
welcome.
time and for your
Thank
book.
you.
I unfortunately we're out of time, and so
Oh,
much of it was lost in the whole
no, it's
technical
okay.
issues. I
Yeah,
hope that you'll come back because I want to finish your
I
book,
will.
and I definitely want to have you back because I think that there's so much more we can learn.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you're out there, let us know how we can how we can sell your book. I want
Oh,
to sell your book.
oh, you do. Oh, just go on Amazon and look for Make Humanity Great Again. You can also just look under my name, Edina, Edina, last name Brown. It's kind of a unique first name, not so unique last name, but the first
Did
name's
I
pretty
say it
unique.
correctly?
You did.
Oh,
You
good.
did.
Okay. My
Yeah.
producer always cringes anytime I say a name because like I always want
No.
to screw it up. But
Honestly, even if you didn't, I mean, who worries? I'm here, we're talking, but I also want to mention I do advocacy training as well. So if someone wants to know how to build power, how to get more strength and, for themselves as an individual and also for a collective group or their community, reach out to me as well. My website is ihpglobal.com. That's the consulting company that I have. But yes, absolutely make humanity great again. Take a read and just try to do something that we're talking about in there. Please. I'm talking about
absolutely.
some things and just try to do some of it. Even if you can do one thing, it'll go a long way. Thanks so much,
Absolutely.
John. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And again, I definitely want to have you back. And maybe next time we'll talk
Absolutely.
about the advocacy work that you do
Yes.
and the training because
Absolutely.
that is essential as well. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will definitely have you back. And I want to thank
Yes.
everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you here next Tuesday at 2 o'clock, probably with more technical issues.
Take care, Sean. Bye. Bye,
Bye bye
everybody.
now. This has been Coup Save America.